right, and there we are. So welcome everyone to the March 2 AdCom, or as I kept referring to it in emails to the town manager, the February 30th AdCom. So we're going to be covering some of the warrant items tonight. So we're just going to jump right to it. So first up is town manager and the town finance manager, Bill Keegan, George Samia, are going to talk through 3 of the articles.
Okay, well, I'll just jump into Article 7. Article 7 is the revolving account article, which we reauthorize every year, required to by state law. We're getting, there are several categories, public health, IT, recreation, and they're all done for various reasons. The largest one is recreation, of course, because that one is all the different recreation programs throughout the year. And the money goes into the account and then goes back out to pay for the staff members, any of the costs that they incur for the programs themselves are then paid for out of that account. So it's just the money goes in, money goes out. Anything that's left over gets reduced to their bottom line, which then can be used to help effectively works as free cash more or less as a basis for them to buy some capital needs, things of that nature. So on the police, public health is that was put in place this past year, dealing with vaccinations. They were able to allow the ability to buy vaccinations and then get reimbursed for the cost by insurance companies. The money was then used to buy additional vaccinations, and then they're used to, and then the process was able to continue throughout the year. IT technology, there was a lot of folks who had home computers for their kids during the school year. As everybody knows, there was a lot of home learning going on during the pandemic. But what happened was that a lot of the IT equipment was breaking down, so they had to find a way to pay for some of those costs, and so they end up charging like I think it was a $50 repair fee that was done throughout the year, and then that money was used to actually pay for the expenses. The recreation revolving I talked about, police and fire apparatus, and those are situations where if they rent vehicles throughout the year and for details, the stadium, etc., they'll pay that into that fund, and then some of those funds can then later be used to help pay down the cost of repairs, or for new vehicles. In some cases, can be used to offset some of the cost of new vehicles in some cases.
Hey, Bill, just so folks can follow along, just a note to Alexa on the FCA side. First, we're still hearing an echo, and second, I'm going to share my screen. As Bill goes through the warrant, it might help to see the actual warrant details, because there are dollar amounts and categories associated with it. So
sure.
I'm going to mute.
Okay. I'll just wait for that to come up. There we go. Okay, great. All right, so I'm actually at the Highway Department revolving fund, and I'm at a little bit of a loss on that particular one. I know George, do you have the reasoning for that?
The highway, now I'm drawing a blank. Hang on a second. See if I get a better explanation here. Police, highway department, fee for services and various town department payments for services. Sounds like they may be repairing things, and they're charging a fee for certain repairs, like almost like the mechanics at the ambulance there, or the fire.
Yeah, isn't this for paying for
set too? Huh?
Isn't this for paying for details? Am I misremembering that?
Outside details? No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no?
I'm gonna have to get back. I don't want to guess and tell you, because I don't really know. You could be 100% right on that one, Paul. I'll check on that one and get back to you folks on that one.
Okay. But Bill, what's the overall concept behind these revolving funds? Why are there revolving funds for these areas and potentially not others?
So it's a good question. Marlo. So what happens is that there are different situations throughout the year. If we put the money into the general fund, and the money was paid to the town in the general way, then it couldn't be used throughout the year unless it had to go back to town meeting and reappropriate it. So what this does is throughout the year allows us to continue to do the business throughout the year. For instance, like a council on aging, senior trips and programs, they have trips throughout the year. And if we put it back into the general fund, we would have to go back to town meeting and reappropriate to pay for those trips every time it happened. So it's like it's almost like a mini business inside those departments where the money rolls in and then rolls right back out.
The important thing on these is to understand that each one of them, okay, of this cluster, there is a specific statutory law that goes with it. And Bill is absolutely right in that what's happening with these is that like you said, take a senior trip. The only way you would be able to pay for that if we did it via appropriation would be you would have to just come up with a number somehow during the budget appropriation. And who's to say how big or how small it's going to be, because these things are often impromptu. So what the state recognizes is certain things, like they might say, hey, look, there's a flower show coming up and the COA wants to go there. They raise the money goes into this account and then it comes out for payment. And the whole rationale for this entire page is that where this is being spent in a non-budgeted way, and even though it's legal, it's saying to you as a taxpayer, hey, I'm not picking on the COA, but COA has this revolving account here. Money is being spent out of it. There is a cap, and that's what you're really voting. How much are you as a taxpayer comfortable with them spending in a non-appropriated way? So you're coming to the town meeting, you're setting the cap, you can go up on it. Somebody might say, well, 50,000, and somebody else might say, 75 or 100. Or you might say, hey, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that kind of money going out. I'd rather it be 25. So what it is it's acting as a governor for the taxpayer to review it once a year and say, am I comfortable with where the cap is on this? And if you are, you're just reaffirming it each year so that the money will come in, the money will go out, and they can spend up to a certain amount, whatever you're putting on it each year, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's very clear. Thank you.
Okay.
So with reference to that, though, how are these numbers determined? I mean, is there like on a year-over-year basis, there's a 10%, 20, 50%, over line here to what is expected, or what's your methodology?
Well, remember one thing, you can't spend more than what's come in at any one point in time.
Yes.
So what they bring in, okay, and what they have put into the account is the absolute top of what you're going to be able to spend. So if you've got one of these accounts and all they brought in the whole year is like $5,000, then they're not going to be able to spend any more than $5,000. Now, year after year, some of them might bring in 25 or 30 or 40, and the money might be retained in there. So what's happening at this point is you're saying, hey, I think the recreation at one point in time, and Bill can correct me if I'm wrong, was prior to the COVID stuff. I think the recreation on an annual basis had around 100 to 125 floating in there at any one point in time. So now, of course, it's drastically reduced because they haven't had any programs for the last couple of years. But what you're doing now is you're saying, hey, here's a cap. I don't want you to go any further than spending within one fiscal year $50,000. Okay.
But now, I think what Mike's referring to, though, George, is that how is it determined and how do they get to that number?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm okay with the concept, by the way. Totally. Right. I'm just asking, how do we get to 450?
It's purely based. It's purely based on
Yeah.
experience, Mike. It's
Yeah.
based on what they've found over the
Right.
years, year over year. If in fact if they find a year where they're starting to come up to the cap, or in some cases might even exceed it, then they will go back to town meeting the next year, or even in the fall perhaps if they needed
Yes.
to go in and adjust the number upwards, and it can be done provided the town meeting approves of it.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. Yeah.
So in the next one, down to Council on Aging Services, Human Services, during the past year, they were able to secure test kits, things of that nature, where they were able to buy several items and then get reimbursed for. They were buying the cost and then just passing them through, and then selling them back to residents for use throughout the year. I'm not sure how much they're going to need that going forward, but I think that it's not a huge number to begin with. And then the Council on Aging community events, if they have like, for instance, they have the ladies who sing and things of that nature, they may have money that comes to them, gets donated to them, or put into their. They sell tickets for something. They can then turn around and buy things to help offset the cost of an event that they may have in the community in the Council on Aging.
Bill, are these spending limits flat to the prior year, or have some of them, or all of them gone up?
No, they seem to be. This is the numbers that that each of the departments have given us as the number that they think is a good number. It's not an exact science, Marlo. It's more it's a cap based upon what they think they will hit. They won't hit. So in other words, it won't usually go exceed that. But it may come in around 70 or 80,000, but it won't go up to it won't exceed 100,000. So it really varies from year to year.
Marlo, last year, the Council on Aging senior trip number was increased. They came and got approval at the last town meeting because they saw that they were coming close to the limit in some of their overnight trips.
I just think a question that you may get at the town meeting, taxpayers may want to know is how much of a change is this? A change from the prior year? Is spending going up? Is spending going down? Is it flat?
I believe. Go ahead.
It can vary from year to year, Marlo, but this year, I don't see anything in there that's significant. I think maybe perhaps the recreation revolving account may have gone up a little because they intend to have more programs this year, particularly as they come out of COVID. There's a lot more events that they're planning for the upcoming year. So I think that number may be up a little bit, but beyond that, the rest of it looks pretty flat to me in terms of overall expenditures.
And again, it's just a spending limit, right? So it's funded spending.
That's right.
So
this is not an appropriation of town funds at all. This is strictly a cap for them to spend money within those particular sub budgets, if you will.
Bill or Paul, I forgot who just asked the question a minute ago. I am looking at something that's slightly more detailed from the year before. Somebody asked, "What's the highway department's piece?" And there is an explanation, and it says fees for services and various town department payments for these services. I tend to think it's that they might be working on the school buses and they have to buy the parts and things like that and work on them, putting the tires on and that type of thing.
Actually, I do recall the situation a few times, George, where they actually had the DPW work on projects that were like an improvement to a school or something where they had actually budgeted funds, and then they charged. They were able to extract the money and put it into that department revolving fund to pay the overtime expenses or the costs associated for the employees in doing that work.
Yeah. Yes.
I do recall that now. Thank you for bringing that up. Any questions? Further questions?
We can move on.
Sure. So the next one was Article 8, which is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate money for an unpaid bill. As of right now, and this is really I mean, probably should have left this as more of a general as opposed to a specific, but right now this is the only one that we have. It's an unpaid bill for a tuition reimbursement claim for a Boyden Library employee where the bill actually came in at the end of the fiscal year, but it was too late to actually submit the town meeting for consideration. So the bill, so we have to, by law in Massachusetts, if he comes in after before the fiscal year, and you don't pay it with the same fiscal year funds, you have to go back to town meeting and get authorization to pay it, and requires a 9/10 vote in order to approve it. So, so we don't get many of these, but it does happen periodically, and that's why there's always a bit of a scramble at the end of the fiscal year to try and pay bills. Right, and I think we have a grace period. Was up till the middle of July, George, as I recall. Will they let us do that?
You're thinking like on a regular payment, you've got to the
Yes.
middle of July that
Yes.
you could still pay the prior year, but
That's
if you
right.
go past that, then you're required to come back, and it
Get
becomes an
authorization.
unpaid bill of a previous year. Yes,
That's correct. That's correct. So this is a case where we were able to take care of this, but fortunately, we don't get a lot of these. So this is just one, and I felt badly because this was for a tuition reimbursement claim for an employee. I think the amount's somewhere in the order of like $1,500. It's not a huge number, so but it's just something that that we're required to by law.
Sorry, I hadn't heard the 9/10 before.
Yeah, it's it's a unique. It's I think it's one of the few that actually requires that kind of a vote. So
That's tougher than zoning, Bill.
it is actually. Yeah, any questions from the committee on that? Okay.
Nope.
All right, moving on to Article 9, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the funds for the OPEB trust fund. This is something that, so for the newer members in particular, this is the discussion we've been having about paying for OPEB, and we have what is known as the other post-employment benefits liability trust fund that was established for the town, and Foxborough has done a very, very good job of paying that liability down over time. So much so that we think that the debt will be retired by 2030, and then so in roughly about 8 years. So, but we have what is required is that we maintain a payment to reach that, to wipe out that liability of what is called the ARC, and is the annual required contribution, and that amount is $985,135 on the town side, and roughly another let me see, probably another 80,000 between water and sewer. So we do provide funding from those two funding sources as well to pay down that liability for the OPEB liability trust. And what that represents, specifically for the new members, is that this helps pay for offset the health insurance liability that the town has for any retired employees that the town will have. And a number of years ago, I think we're going back about 20 years now, the state or the federal government said that on the GASB 34, if I'm not mistaken, said that you had to actually acknowledge that liability, and then you actually had to put it on the books and then pay it down, so that you didn't so the liability was actually as part of your overall funds and your fund and declaration at the end of the year. A number of committees chose to ignore it, but then they formalized it and said you had to do it. But again, there are still a number of committees that have actually ignored it, and our position in Foxborough has been, and other communities that are paying this down, is that it's a liability against the town, and actually we should pay it. And so it's no different than paying the debt service on a bond issue. So we have to pay it, and the good news is that we're getting close to paying it down, which by the way helps to contribute towards our AAA bond rating, which is something that the S&P and the bond rating agencies love to see this. So we're in good shape for that. So go ahead, George.
Just a minor thing, Bill, on it. You're absolutely right. We're paying it, but when we say we're paying it, there's no money going out the door. We're actually
it's being put in the trust, right? It's put
in the trust that by the way, the town retains. So it's in our coffers. So simply offsetting the liability, but that money is in our coffers, and it's earning interest. So it's not like it's going out the door or anything.
Right. So we
What
set
does
that money
happen to
aside
them?
effectively every year, and that's put us in a really good position. So we don't. So and at some point beyond 2030, we'll just pay the ongoing cost of what that will be, which by then will be significantly lower than the payment that we're making now. And that combined with the pension liability, which is supposed to be retired, I think pretty close to that date, if I'm not mistaken, George. I think it's around 2030, 31, 32.
Yeah, within 2 to 3 years at the same time.
Right.
Of course, it may be accelerated depending on how fast the stock market's going up and down on at least on the OPEB end. Because a lot of it it jumped forward because the stock market was doing so well. So yeah,
Right.
But in or around that time anyway.
Yeah, and I stand corrected. I think the pensions are going to be retired before this well, and then I think we can just whatever we have that we can then put towards paying off this as well. So they're probably within a few years of each other. So that's why I think going out, looking forward from that point in 2032 and beyond, the town should be, if things hold as they currently are, we should be in pretty good position.
Yes.
I have a question on this.
Sure.
Bill, you mentioned that we are being billed by MIA. That's for the regular, I'll say $9 million, $10 million, whatever it is. The amount we have for Article 9 is an amount that we choose.
It's actually what we have a third party actuary who comes up with that payment amount for Jack. So Maya doesn't actually bill us for that itself. It's put into the money's put into a trust based upon the actuarial evaluation and this is the amount that they determine we have to pay every year to pay down the debt.
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, Jack, Maya is our health insurance.
Then
there's the pension, which is in Norfolk County, and then there's the OPEB, which is the one you're talking about.
Yeah, and that money is retained by the town, as George correctly stated. And then, but again, that money is the amount that we pay is determined by a third-party actuary that determines that for the town, and then we report that each year to as part of our audit, and then that gets reported to the various agencies as well.
Yes. Yes.
George, what is the amount that you're proposing for Article 9, and what are the sources of that amount?
Usually it's the big portion which Bill just read, which was the 900. Let me just see that number again.
85,000.
985. That's raised, through the budget, and then the other two numbers, which was 63. I'm having a hard time seeing in here, and 15,000 in some change, is taken from the water and sewer free cash, coming to a total of $1,064,000 and some change. That number comes, as Bill just mentioned, if you circle around, directly off of the suggested actuarial study, which brings us down to that 2031 or 32 payoff date. If that answers.
Well, the point I'm making is the suggested actuarial date is simply the date that we are choosing to make the payments so that we catch up. And and as Bill recognizes, the reason I'm asking this is I'm concerned that you're paying more than 50% of the meals tax towards this, whereas the other 50% should be going to roads and sidewalks. So the reason for the question is, what's the source of the $985,000, and is more than $500,000 coming from meals tax?
The answer is yes, Jack. The answer is Jack. The answer to that, Jack's question is yes. It comes from meals tax, and it also comes from free cash as well.
Right.
So because we both of those are sources for paying that.
Right.
Yes. And that's the point of contention that you have, and I recognize that.
Right.
Yeah, we will serve that up as a special topic in an upcoming meeting. I don't want to circle
Right.
on that, but Jack is correct in asking what the sources of revenue and making
Yeah,
sure that's
he's right.
clarified for the committee.
That's right.
All right.
But as Bill just pointed out, there are other sources as well. So they're
Right.
all, I mean, in the end, you're mixing all of them together to make your entire budget. So,
So
I
I
mean,
think George is right. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you up
Yeah.
here, George, but I think it's important. I don't want to forget this point is that going into this payment is for fiscal year 23.
Yes.
The payment for fiscal 22 will not be addressed until the fall of this calendar year because we did the same thing last year, and we're waiting to see how much we actually raise through the OPEB through the meals tax and to actually help pay that. So you recall that last year we paid about I think we only raised about $500,000 in meals tax, and so we had to make up the difference through free cash to make that payment. So I think that's the issue, and I know Jack has a different understanding of that than perhaps others do, but that's, and we'll address that as Chairman quickly points out. I'm happy to make a presentation on that at another time.
The other thing I want to talk about is we've talked about OPEB fairly frequently because we delayed a payment right at the onset of COVID, and then we're effectively catching up. And so I want to make sure that we looked at a schedule last fall for catch up, and we're still, I would think, on track for that.
Yes, that's right. So if we make the payment in the fall, we will be fully caught up.
Okay.
And we'll be back on track. And this payment will put us actually on track for fiscal year 23, as we have been in other previous years.
I mean, we will have an upcoming meeting on sources of revenue and free cash, Bill. Try and squeeze that one in as well. But I do know from your conversations with the Board of Selectmen, there are like 50 events at Gillette this year. Is that true?
That's correct. Yeah.
50 plus. So I think at least cash should look, I mean, the meals taxes and other income should look better.
Yeah, there's no question. In fact, we're tracking that very closely to see how we are, and we are on a pretty good track for this year.
Okay.
Yes.
So I derailed us slightly from OPEB. Do other folks on the committee have questions?
I have a couple of simple questions. What's the size of the liability trust fund today, and who's responsible for it? Is it just in cash, and is there a trustee or anything, or?
It's primarily sitting and residing in a sort of a stock market fund that is controlled by the treasurer. It's called Bartholomew. It's a form of it's like a Fidelity type company. The only difference between this and others, this is one of the few, and I've worked in a number of different towns. Bartholomew is one of the few that's been sort of, there's a nod from the state that, normally they don't like like investing in the stock market because obviously it could go down and you've lost a lot of money. But the Bartholomew Fund is one of the ones that's like, pretty solid and has been certified by the state that this is a decent, thing to put it in, and you're not risking the money. And it is approximately, the last time I think Bill and we looked at it, I don't know, a number of months back towards the end of June. Wasn't it about 15 million in there now, Bill?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. About 15 million.
Right. If that answers the question, sometimes I go.
It does partially. I mean, I sort of came from this business a little bit, and so I'm thinking through it as, what's the risk of reaching it in 30 based on returns, and do you have cash returns? Is it guaranteed money? It sounds like it isn't. Sounds like it's at risk, which might help you, but might also backfire at some point, and then you end up having a accrued of 2040.
Okay, so it's a very low risk investment, Mike.
Right.
So just so you know that it's very controlled. The Bartholomew is in the business of doing municipal type of investing for that reason. Yeah, that's what they do. They're actually utilized by a lot of cities and towns for that reason, because they don't want to put it in high risk vehicles for that reason. So it is very low risk in that regard.
So they have some sort of like set of prospectus or agreement on what the management is, and
that's correct.
And somebody you guys
you can't put the money overseas or anything like that. It has to be done within the U.S. and it's a very well-managed vehicle.
That was my rudimentary way of, or not very good, clear way of saying that they got the nod from the state, meaning that the state of Massachusetts approves of it because of the way they handle the fund, you know?
But the
That's
state
right.
is also the administrator, George?
No, Bartholomew.
No. Who's the governmental entity responsible for this?
So we are in that regard.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it gets, the GASB is the one that looks at it
Got
and
it.
reports back to, when we do our audit each year, we report to GASB how the progress we're making on that.
Okay.
And that's the Government Association, the Government Accounting Bureau that looks at that. So we actually, we're at the point now where we're probably rated one of the higher communities in the state for that in that regard. So we're in a good position. We're not we're paying it according to what the actuarial analysis has shown, so we could retire within we're trying to do it at the same track of the pension funds. So we're trying to track the both of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Only to add that I think, Bill, we're one of 4 towns out of 350 that are that have got this kind of substantial money. The rest have kind of. No, I'm not saying nobody else has put anything in, but they're nowhere near where
It's substantially less than what we've done.
Right.
And the consequence is, as people start retiring in larger numbers, they're going to have to start paying those out of their budgets.
Right. Well, the town's going to have to pay for it as you go.
Exactly.
Liability for the town. Right.
Yep.
So it'll be an increased cost to the town for doing that. So this is taking care of a long-term liability on a short-term way. So this is a good thing.
Okay.
All right. I'll turn to Article.
Yep. Go ahead.
Do you want to go to Article? Was it
19?
19, I believe. Right, which is the Select Board amendment to the Special Acts General Bylaws and Zoning. So this is one which the Board of Selectmen has asked for consideration, where the term, which would effectively change the term Board of Selectmen to Select Board. That is a term that is now more commonly being used throughout the Commonwealth, throughout the country and other places. The term selectman is not as common in this part in other parts of the country as it is here. But I will say that the term has changed to be more politically correct, if you will, about how it's stated. So I think I've asked Chairman Leah Gibson to be here as well to help comment on this. But I think this is what this does. It effectively would change all of our laws and bylaws, and any references to that, and any of the bylaws itself would be then in our code to be changed to the term Select Board wherever it is referenced. It is important to note here that because the term selectmen, Board of Selectmen is actually referenced in the town zoning bylaws, that this would require a 2/3 majority vote at town meeting because of that. So we do have to make that note up front. But having said that, a lot of communities have gone to this term, and in fact, if you take a look at our surrounding communities, we're one of the few that it has not yet. So I'll leave it at that and ask Chairman Gibson if she would like to comment further on it.
Good evening, everyone. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory at this point. I mean, I know when I go to meetings for MMA, we seem to be one of the last ones that are still Board of Selectmen, and people actually end up referring up to us as Select Board quite often. I think actually I noticed even the health department did in the presentation last night. So, I think this is just something that it's time to do. We did talk to Bob Cutler about what's required with our zoning and everything. So I'm here if there's any questions, but I think that it's pretty self-explanatory at this point.
It is full disclosure here that there is a cost, a minor cost to doing this. I just want everybody to be aware that we're not asking for an appropriation to do this, because it's something I think we can handle internally. But there's about a $3,500 to $4,000 cost to work with the company who does our code to change all the terms and change the website, things of that nature. So it's relatively small, and we'll handle it. But I just it is a change which I think it's it's a little more difficult than people think it is because of all the different places it's cited. But this is the best way to do it, and I think it's something that where it's actually a little bit overdue. We probably should have done it before, but it just seemed that the current board has raised the concern that we should probably fall in line with the rest of the world, and it's time to do that. So I'm glad it's being addressed at this point.
I have a question, and I fully support this, so please don't misconstrue where this question is going. Does this address the term chairman?
That's a good point.
In this is not. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole if we don't have to. It's at this point. Does this article address that? Yes or no?
I don't know that it does. We often refer to Leah, who is actually a chairperson. We use the term chair as opposed to chairman. Or Madam Chair, something like that. We don't, use the term chairman in very few areas, but I do suppose that could be construed as an inconsistency if we were to change the overall.
I don't really
address that.
Huge deal. I was just wondering, and
it's a fair point, Dan. It's a fair point.
If you're going to address the issue, address it all at once type of a deal, or if we're going to have to go back and change this in a couple of years.
I don't know that the term chairman or chair, a chair would have a significant difference if we could just make that administrative change. Whereas the term selectman, select board is a legal term that we have to. That's why we have to do it this way. So that's an interesting point. I'll ask. We'll try and find out some more about it. But it's a fair point.
Yeah, it's a good question, Dan. I'm trying to remember what's in the code, but I'm sharing my screen, so I can't go look. But I don't even remember if it mentions. We've always said chair and vice chair without even thinking about saying chairman. But I don't know what the code says. But it's a good question and worth just double checking as long as we're going to peel open the code. And you said, and Leah or Bill, you said 2/3 on this one?
That's correct, because it does require us to change the zoning bylaws as well.
Okay. All right, opening up to other questions from the committee. I can't see you while I'm sharing my screen, so feel free to jump in. Or we can move on.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'll move on to Article 20, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I'm going to unshare my screen at this point. I just want to show, essentially, this is the entire rewritten code, right? It's a fairly substantial revision to code. And
right, it's chapter 184.
I don't know if it does any good for me to show all this. It's long. So I'm showing everybody the length of it, and I'm going to go off share.
So chapter 184 is the code relating to door-to-door canvassers and solicitors. Currently in the town, individuals who try and sell door-to-door are required to register with the town. But what this one goes is it takes it a step further and says that individuals who don't want people to be solicited at their house can actually sign up and then and be put on what is known as a non-solicitation status, which would be kept with the town. Particularly probably with the police department, as I talked with the chief about this. And he indicated that we would maintain a list there. And if for anybody who actually comes to them for a permit to do door-to-door sales, they would then be given the list before they actually began their work. The other thing this does is that it puts a little more meat on the bones with respect to those individuals who actually try going door-to-door and then realize later that they should have had a permit. Or if somebody calls and say, hey, somebody's going door to door, and then the police go and stop the person, then it puts a little more meat on the bones in terms of them actually providing a fine to them if they continue to do it. So typically right now, it's more of a, they'll bring people in, you make sure they get registered. They do, if they continue to do it, then it becomes more of a, then if the person becomes unruly, of course, they could take action at that point. But this actually makes it a more accountable process. This was actually mirrored from the one I believe it was in Bourne, Leah, if I'm not mistaken. From the
Yeah, we
town of
started with
Bourne.
a couple samples because quite a few towns have adopted this as I watch other communities.
Right.
So town council did pull up quite a few examples and then
Right.
ended up using the one that they thought fit best
Right.
for Foxborough, but there was a couple examples we looked at.
Yeah, I think there was one in Bourne. Go ahead.
Bourne adopted this most recently. I think they did it in their fall town meeting. So I think we live in a world more and more. I think COVID maybe exacerbated a little bit, but you know, nowadays we don't love people coming up to our doors, you know, uninvited. COVID made that even more apparent, you know, with people coming up to your doors, even more of a turnoff. We're hearing more, you know, scams. I was at your neighbor's house and I came here. So it's just more visibility in the ability for our citizens to, you know, opt to be put on much like a do not call list where they can opt out. And that list would be handed to the solicitor with no personal information, just the addresses that they're not allowed to go to. And it would allow our citizens to opt out of any door-to-door solicitation that, of course, is allowed today.
So Leo,
you kind of just spoke to it, but I was wondering what the genesis was for this. Is this proactive or is this reactive due to a lot of complaints?
It's I think it's more a little bit of both, Marlo, because I think folks in the community do. We've found from dealing with folks in the community that a lot of folks don't like to be solicited on a door-to-door basis. This is a little bit proactive in the sense that that Leah and other members of the board had suggested that maybe we take a look to see what other tools are available and what other methods are available throughout the Commonwealth. So we then worked with town council, and he was familiar that there were several model bylaws that were in other communities, as Leah pointed out, and that we were able to look at those bylaws and pick the one that seemed to be the most compatible for Foxborough. Now, I will say that there's not I asked the chief this question based on a question that Leah had asked me this afternoon. She goes, you know, how many times do we actually get different companies solicit throughout the year? And there are several. There's about 5 different companies that they're doing on a regular basis. And of those 5 companies, there's about 40 employees that are associated with those 5 companies. So throughout any time during the year, you may get solicited by any one of these companies for the various wares that they want to sell. So, this does not apply to groups that are raising money for charitable purposes, for like the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts, things like that, the 501c3 groups that are not going that your traditional groups that people would go door to door for, Girl Scouts, things of that nature. So I think it's pretty well written document. I think I encourage you all to take a look at it, but happy to answer any questions if you have, and if I can't answer them, I'll get the answer for you.
And if I can just add one more point, because it is besides the do not solicit list. So, you know, we do have a current provision, but this also strengthens our current provision, requiring a license rather than just a mere registration to go door to door to canvass and solicit. And it establishes that do not solicit list. So it is kind of 2 pieces. So the license piece and then tightening up the eligibility and enforcement provisions as well.
Just one comment to update. Bill, you said the police department has the list. Actually, as written, the town clerk is responsible for maintaining the list, and that then gets shared to the police station.
Right. You're absolutely right, Jack. I think the list of the individuals who are permitted, but I think in terms of, are you saying about the people who will get the list for the non-solicitation list, or
if somebody wants to go on the non-solicitation list, that list is maintained by the town clerk, and the town clerk shares it with the police department.
That's correct. You're absolutely right. So I think what the police department would do would obtain a list from the clerk's office to make sure the person would have it before they went out.
And it does raise a good point, though, Jack. Just make sure, dot the I's, cross the T's, make sure Bob's office and the police are in agreement with that before it's, you know, finalized.
I have a couple of, 2 questions. One, when we change something like that, I mean, I never really get solicitors where I live here in town, so I guess I'm a lucky one. But educating the public, number one, that if they wanted to do this, the process, and also letting them know what kinds of solicitors are exempt. So I think if they get on a list, maybe they should get a mailing with, some information that they can keep near their fridge or wherever. So I don't know if that's planned, to educate the public. And then this might be a little strange, but what if, I've seen people now with no solicitation signs. What if a solicitor goes up to someone's house who does have one of those signs, but that person didn't know about it or never registered for the official list? What would happen to that solicitor if the homeowner said, I'm going to call the police? Because things like that do happen in people's lives. Would the police come over and say, find that person? Do you know what I mean?
It's a fair question, Rafaela. So
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of things people would ask and come up with in their homes, So
in that case, if they had not registered with the town, then they probably wouldn't be subject to the fine. All right, but I do think in that case they would still be able to call the police, especially if they're uncomfortable with the person being solicited, and if they themselves, would be in a position where they don't want somebody at their door, they can certainly call the police at any time. The police would probably have less ability to find them especially if they have been properly permitted for that work. So I think, but if they're properly permitted and they are on the no-fly list, if you will, they can actually then they're subject to the fine if they continue if they go to the door. Okay.
I just think the educating the public, the citizens of Foxborough is kind of an important thing for that one. And
that's actually how I found out about it. I saw Born. I follow many different communities, and I saw them educating, their citizens, about the new bylaw, how the process works and all that. So I would think we could put something out, on social media, on the town's website, announce it in meetings, and get that out there as well.
Right.
We're actually in the process of beefing up our communications plans now because the world has evolved in a different direction, as we all know. So, mailings that are not nearly as effective as technological notifications nowadays. So we're trying to maximize that effort as well. And then we'll continue to look at ways in which we can inform the public because, we're in a different world right now. And, the newspapers are not as obviously as prevalent and they're not, they don't cover as nearly as many stories as they used to. So I think we have to rely on the people rely on the community a lot more for information. Right. So I think that's the case.
And then one minor thing for me, the term hawkers, honestly, is that really an unruly peddler, or are they synonymous? Or
no, it's actually a legal term that's used in the statute itself. That where we reference the statute, it's that's a term that's considered that's an old Massachusetts legal term. Okay,
thank you.
Bill, would political canvassing fall under this, or would that be exempt?
No, political canvassing is that's actually that's a constitutional right, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I think you have the right to do that, and I don't think there's any ability for us to stop that. Okay. Happy to answer any more questions. They're all good questions, by the way.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, we appreciate you appearing. So Leah, Bill, before you drop off, one quick thing. I watched the meeting last night and the question of citizen petitioners came up. So we are trying to have them in next week. That would be Zoom and televised. We have not gotten any of the 3 confirmed yet. So just letting you know that we're trying. So it may, I don't know how the timing on this is going to work because the AdCom's starting to run out of time a little bit.
Yeah, and I think given you're having, given it's difficult to try to coordinate with everyone, I think trying to get them in for a second meeting will be tough. Yeah. So I'm really hoping the members of the Board of Selectmen can tune in and watch and the community can watch your presentations. Yeah,
no. For everyone's reference, I think the board agreed that having 2 separate presentations from them was effectively not a good use of time. So just letting you know that we're trying to get them in. All right. Thank you both for your time. Yeah. You were going to say something, Bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I just remind Dan that we have the Capital Committee on Saturday, starting at 8:30. So just want to make sure you're aware of that. I think you are. So I appreciate that. And we are going to meet at Town Hall. there are a couple of members who, well, one member that at least is gonna zoom in. Chris, who's actually away at a wedding, is gonna be zooming in to participate, though, just so you know that. Okay.
Planning on being there in person.
Great. Okay.
Right.
I'm happy to stick around, Mr. Chairman, if you like, or if you need me to.
Yeah,
I'll
you
drop
could
off. It's
mute
up
us
to
in the background and drop off. The rest of this is going to be
Okay.
logistic discussion, so which is very exciting, right? It's important stuff, but
That's right. It's important stuff.
I'll leave
That's right.
that to your discretion.
Right. Well, thank you very
But
much.
thank you both for appearing.
No,
Thanks.
thanks for all your work. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, logistics. So you may have caught wind of the fact that I have appointed Dan to the Capital Committee. So that was very recent. So I've dropped off the committee and Dan is going to take on that role. So thank you for that, Dan. So any questions about sidewalks, roads, all of them, you can direct them to Dan. The other thing is yesterday, Selena dropped off the committee. She resigned from the committee. She said she had conflicts, time conflicts, personal conflicts. So we appreciate if she's watching. Still, we appreciate all the work that she did for us, and we will miss her. Okay. All right. Before I launch into some logistical stuff, which I'm actually, my word just collapsed. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about?
At some point, will we be returning to in-person meetings?
I think so. I would like to start on the 16th, but that's not. I wanted to canvass y'all how you felt about that, about coming back on the 16th. I see you could raise your hand. I'm in favor. This is not a vote. This is just, I'm checking for the people who are here. We already know Jay's opinion on that. He has shared that in the past. So that's what I would tend toward. We will still have to have the conversation of televising or not televising. And the last vote was to not televise, as a reminder. And that will get a little complicated. That's one of the reasons I'd really, Jack, like to have the citizen petitioners in next week so that we can get it televised and that people can see.
Okay, so that's why you don't want to go in person next week.
That's exactly right. I mean, we could have gone next week. The other thing is I'm doing these agendas a couple of weeks in advance, just to be really honest. This has been a very difficult agenda to put together. I'm not even sure the legalese has been written on all the articles yet. So my suspicion is next week's going to be a long week. So hang on just a sec. I'm going to share again. My Microsoft Word is completely locked up and collapsed. So thought it might help. So for some of you, this is very familiar, but I just want to talk about what we're going to be doing for the rest of the month. So we are going to be meeting at least through the 23rd, possibly the 30th. I have not thought through how that's going to work yet because technically the recommendations are due the 30th. I don't know whether I've got a day or two of leeway on that or not. Essentially, there's days that it has to be in before the actual town meeting. There's days in advance it has to be published. I actually think we might be fine with a couple of days, but not many. So as part of that, and this is again more directed at the new folks, as you take on agenda items, you will also be writing them up. And those will come together in the form of a recommendation that will go to the town. It will be published. It will also be handed out at town meeting for people to skim through. I know from personal experience of reading through warrants and going to town meetings that the AdCom version is much easier to read and much clearer, simply because we'll put some plain English in about what the article is about, and then how we reached our conclusion or how we decided to approve, not approve, or take no action. So let's talk through operating budgets. Let's talk what's going to happen at the meeting. So in the past, the vice chair has been the one to read out the operating budget. I'm going to do it this time. Dan did not know that yet, just because I feel like Dan's got a lot of things stacked on his plate. It is the most exciting part of any town meeting because you read line by line the budget amounts and the sources of funds. It is quite exciting. Dan will have CIP budget. We've assigned fire and revolving fund to Mike and Eric. Unpaid bills and OPEB Sharon will have. And then, so with Dennis having left, so Dennis filed his papers Thursday and immediately submitted his resignation from the committee. He is running unopposed as of right now. And so Dennis is, for all intents and purposes, not going to be able to contribute to the committee. I told him my real hope was that he would be opposed and then lose and then come back to the committee. He didn't take that too much umbrage to that. But so Dennis has been heavily involved in the contracts. He's on the personnel board. And so we're handing that off. I believe I gave that to Jack. Please tell me if I'm wrong, Jack.
Now, I have a couple of comments on that if you are willing to
please.
entertain them.
Yeah, no, jump right in.
Yeah, they're Articles 10 to 15, if my memory is correct.
Yep.
And in the past, and of course, what happens in negotiations is nobody gives in until the last minute because you want to squeeze out everything you can from the other guy. And so what happens in this situation is contracts will be settled right, a relatively few weeks before town meeting. They will come to the advisory committee who has no time to look at it. And it goes to town meeting and they represent it on town meeting. There is insufficient time. So what I would like to propose is that next week you put on the agenda Articles 10 to 15.
Yep.
And this committee should mark no action on each of them. And because we are required to give a recommendation. So if we give a recommendation of no action, we can always change it. If one of the contracts is signed with sufficient time, then we review it and change our recommendation. But I think we want to make a statement that we are not willing to tolerate last minute, stick it in the mill and just push it through.
So do you know when, have you talked to Mike Johns about when he'll be available to talk about it? And what did he say?
And he said, some of them are pretty close, some of them are not. I don't have his, I could look up the email and give you the exact wording, but that's more or less what it is. It looks like he expects some of them to move to the final version very quickly, whereas others are not so close. In that case, for those that arrive at a contract in reasonable time, we will review that, probably approve it, and recommend that the town approve it. But and the town will at least have the voters will at least have time to consider whatever the items are that were in that contract.
Well, I have thoughts, but I see Bill has opened his window.
So Mr. Chairman, if I could just say briefly, I'm not really in a position to comment on the status of contracts other than to say that Mike is correct in saying that I know that he's working very, very hard and has been working week after week after week to try and get movement on these contracts, and he is very close on a couple of them. My sense is that more often than not, if a couple of them go, the rest of them will go closely to them unless they're feeling very strongly about a certain position on something. But Mike made it abundantly clear that we want to get these done sooner rather than later, and that. But as Jack correctly points out, there's always a tendency to try and wait to the last minute to see, how others will react, and then if there's anything else they can try and get at the very last minute through the pressure of time. But I do think that it actually is incumbent upon them as well, because some of these contracts involve detail numbers that they could benefit by if in fact they are approved in the spring contract as opposed to the fall, because you can't go retroactive on a detail number once it's actually worked. So it's in their best interest to get it done in some cases. So I think there's a genuine effort being made to try and get this done sooner rather than later. And it's not due to anybody's part to not try and get it done sooner rather than later, but it's the committee's option to do whatever they wish. And I would just hope that you would give it full consideration if it does come in at a reasonable time, because at that point, it becomes very difficult for us, where we're actually required by law to put it in front of town meeting before us within a certain time frame, according to state statute. So that's why we try and get it done as soon as we can to a town meeting for that reason. So, but I do understand Jack's point, and it's a committee's decision to how you want to proceed from there. But I just to reemphasize the fact that there is a genuine effort being made by both sides to try and get the contracts done.
Yeah, and Bill, I don't think
I was not questioning that at all. I'm questioning that they are not working diligently towards it. That's not the issue. It's simply this committee needs sufficient time to look at the results, and the town voters need the time to consider it.
It's understood.
Is there a way to bring in an earlier deadline for these talks?
That's often discussed and tried, Dan, but I think at the end of the day, if somebody yields at the very, and goes past that deadline, it would be hard for the town or the other party to say no. It's if you're following what's going on in the Major League Baseball right now, you can put those deadlines in all the time, and they'll move. Because
I understand that, but I guess my point is that there's no penalty for them extending all the way to the last minute. Not that there should be, but there's no benefit for them doing it earlier either. So for example, if Steelworkers Unit A works something into their contract, well, B is going to want to come back and say, oh no, we want that too. So, there's no benefit to getting it done early. It only negatively impacts the town in that they don't really get the chance to voice any opinions prior to town meeting. So I don't want to, I am complaining, but I'm also saying I don't know what a path forward would be to make this more effective for both the AdCom and the citizens. But there's got to be something we can do to say, and again, I'm with Jack. We're not saying that Mike is not working, around the clock to get these done as soon as possible. That's not what we're saying at all. But again, there's got to be something we can do, something that we can implement to give us enough time to review the contracts. And because, whether, I don't want to say whether they like it or not, but it's essentially rubber stamped by the Board of Selectmen. All the work's done by Mike, you review, we get the legal review, it's handed to them. There's no, whoa, hold on, we don't necessarily think this is right.
No, that's not entirely accurate, Dan, because what does happen is they do get updated periodically. And it has been, and we've already had an update earlier this year on the process. But what we do is we go and we update with them on the goals that we want to try and achieve at the table. And Mike continues to push forward on those items as we can. And right now, I do think that there's no magic bullet here. I will tell you that I've been doing this for a long time, and it's pretty consistently a tactic that's used. I get it. But we try very hard to try.
Well, then the tactic from us is to say no. It's not a good tactic, but neither is the other tactic. So,
but I think
there's got to be middle ground.
So what we've tried to do is say, look, we want it done by a certain date. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult for us to get it through the reviewing parties, and we've stated that from the beginning. So, and I think that's going to be a case where, if it does come in after that date, we're going to have to say, we could be in a position where, if it comes beyond that date, the selectmen could say that we're going to have to wait until the next town meeting to do that. Now, the other option then becomes, do we call a special town meeting just for that purpose? Yep. And I think that becomes a challenge as well, as you know. So I think
quick question. Number one, what is that date? In number two, what would be the immediate impact if it was? So I guess what I'm asking is, do the contracts expire at town meeting, or do they expire at the end of the year?
No, so each contract expires on June 30th. All right, that's it. Every one of the contracts have that deadline. So and then what happens is they don't. It's not like they go away. What they have, what is called is evergreen clauses, which basically says that the terms and the conditions continue on. There's no additional raises or anything like that until another town meeting action is taken. Okay.
Got it. And what's the date for this spring's for negotiation?
I don't want to misstate this, but I know that he was trying to get it done within I believe by the end of this month to get it done. So it was, or even the middle of the month if he could. But I know that he's very close this week on a couple of them. So I know he's very much aware of the deadline that you're all stating. So, and he's been trying to reach that.
So Paul or Dan, what's the AdCom's history in regards to these contracts? How often have they come in sufficient time for the advisory committee to make a recommendation? How often has the no action approach been taken? And I guess the third question is, I really wonder, even with sufficient time to review the contract, how feasible it is for the AdCom to second guess and potentially, make a recommendation of rejection.
So if I could say that, so the purpose of the review, the only thing that the advisory committee is acting on is the funding. You're not acting upon the terms and conditions of the agreement. That's exclusively the authority of the Board of Selectmen under the state statute. So I think that's important for everybody to know that, because you don't get to renegotiate the contract once it gets to you. Well, the only thing that you're trying to do, and when it comes to you, is determine, is the funding that goes for this contract appropriate and reasonable? You follow me? So I think the Board of Selectmen have, under state statute, chapter one.
Is that exactly true, Bill? Because we don't necessarily say where the funding sources are, but we can say how much the funding is, correct?
Well,
let me ask you this. Is it like the school budget, where we can't decide what's where, but we decide the number?
Right. So what happens is that you effectively either vote to recommend the funding, or you don't recommend the funding, period. It really comes down to that. I mean, I suppose you could get down to saying we're going to fund up to this certain amount of money and no more. You could say that's another option.
Okay.
But you wouldn't have the ability just to say, I don't like that particular provision in that article of that contract. You don't get to renegotiate that. So, I mean, that's just the way the statute.
To Jack's point, I don't think we're planning on renegotiating or even attempting.
You don't want to, believe me. I trust me when I tell you, you don't want to do that.
We're just doing our due diligence for the rules we've been asked to support.
And I think that, and as you should, by the way, I'm not trying to diminish the role of the committee here, but that's set strictly by statute, so you got to be careful on that. And there's some new members here, so I want everybody to be understanding of that role.
As a reminder to both Jack and Dan, the last couple of years we had somebody on the AdCom actually involved in those negotiations, who then came back and reported. So that was our validation of it. Which it occurs to me, Jack, you could always have Dennis come in and present, right, as a retired AdCom member, along with Mike Johns, just to affirm that his AdCom hat at the time when he was involved in the discussions, he had that on.
Well,
I'm not sure that we should be pursuing this much longer. I just wanted to come back to a question that Marlo asked earlier. I believe it was Marlo. At the end of the day, when it comes to town meeting, if there's no contract, we will vote. We will recommend no action.
Sure.
So we can. But we are also required to make a recommendation. So we can just make a recommendation of no action on all of these. And next week, when there is a contract signed, we can change that recommendation. So all I'm saying is, let's get that part squared away.
So Jack, you can make any motion you want as a member of the AdCom. Given how messy next week already is, I had not planned to start voting until the 16th and 23rd. The 16th gives the town 7 weeks to contemplate and us 2 weeks, and that seems like more than enough in terms of thinking through whether the amount makes sense, whatever benchmark you're using. So,
I can make one suggestion to Mr. Chairman, which may help Jack and Dan in this position. I think that to impose a deadline now that we're this far into the process, would be difficult. It would be difficult for the union to accept it, and as well as the town to try to push through this as much as we can. But I do think it's fair to say, as a matter of policy, that the committee itself could say, we want the contracts to be completed by so X number of weeks before town meeting, so that we have an opportunity to fully review them. And I think that's a fair position to take. I mean, because I've actually utilized that approach with other communities so that everybody knows that there is a deadline, and if the contract is not reviewed within a reasonable time, if it's not adequate time to review it, then the committee always has the ability to, as Jack correctly points out, to take no action on the item itself. Now, that doesn't mean that the item won't still go forward the town meeting. It just means the advisory committee will have taken no action. The vote have recommended no action on the item.
Bill, I was not suggesting a deadline. I was suggesting we have certain requirements legally, and we can put those in place and then change them if the contract is signed in an appropriate time frame.
Fair enough.
That's all.
Fair enough.
So Jack, Mike will be coming with some contracts, you think, next week?
Probably not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's hard to say because the next week is if there's a vote, if there is an agreement, a tentative agreement this week on a particular contract, that then has to go back for ratification before the body of the union, and then the selectmen have to act on it as well before it would even get to your body. So that's going to take at least a couple weeks.
So Jack, I'm not opposed to the notion that Bill suggested of essentially then setting a deadline and saying, if we don't get the information and the walkthrough within, I mean, our recommendations are due the 30th, right? If we don't get it within a reasonable amount of time, pick a time, 2 weeks in advance, 1 week in advance, then we're going to no action. And I think that's a policy thing we should think about.
No action that the advisory committee is not making a recommendation one way or the other, or is no action mean we're recommending that the voters take no action?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. The recommendation will be that the town meeting take no action on it. That doesn't mean that the town meeting will act accordingly, but it does give a clear indication that, look, you didn't get it to us in time, and as such, we didn't have an opportunity to fully vet it. We'll have to rely on the selectmen or the town management team to satisfy our questions, if you will, at town meeting itself, because the committee was not given an opportunity to fully vet it. Okay.
Well, that was exciting. Any other questions or comments on that one?
So just to be sure I understand.
Yeah.
So the AdCom's no action recommendation is a recommendation that the voters don't vote on, don't approve or
That's
reject,
right.
Don't take any action.
Right. And it could mean that if the town meeting feels so compelled to agree with that, then it could happen. And then what it would mean for us, that if the contract is approved, we then have to schedule a meeting within a reasonable time frame. And there is a set time frame in 150E, if I recall, that we have to submit it for consideration. So we would then probably have to call a special town meeting later on to do that, which we probably would do in the fall and do it that way. But I think it behooves them, and they know this, that to try and get it done, because, as I said, there's going to be a lot of detail work this year and things of that nature. And there's also a lot of work that's going to overtime work that's going to be done in different areas this year. And the sooner they get those contracts in place, they'll be reaping the benefit of those rates, et cetera. So it's in their best interest to get it done. Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Glad you're hanging in there.
Sorry to be
no. Why are you sorry? That's Well,
yeah.
I'm gonna ping you again in just a minute.
Fair enough.
Let me just keep going. So citizen petitions. Marlo, I'd sent the citizen petitioner an email and copied you last week. Have we heard back from her?
No, but I didn't. I'll look again, but I didn't think you copied me on it.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I'll follow up. Sidewalk, that one is Dan's. That was, just so everybody knows, there was no citizen petitioner information submitted with the petition. The person had a phone number listed in Foxborough, but it was shut down. It no longer worked. And I finally tracked him down at work a couple of days ago. And he's like, oh yeah, that's me. So we're going to try and get him in next week. I told him that we would want to. And then Dan, you'll be reaching out to him soon.
Yep. Well, didn't get the chance to yesterday.
Yeah.
Today. Yep.
Yeah. And the direct mailing, I've also sent an email to the person there. Bill, I did catch up with town council on that one. His commentary was that since it doesn't explicitly change a bylaw, it comes across as more of a recommendation to action than an actual law change. So
Right.
one thing I asked Pat Costello is, when this person's in, can you come talk to us too? And he said he could make himself available.
Right.
Okay.
He actually has given me, I just saw some guidance from him earlier this evening from him. So I'll be happy to share that with you.
Okay. 19 and 20 we have actually talked about. So these are still pending. We're not going to have an answer from the Attorney General about whether these are even on the warrant until roughly March 8th. Is that still holding up, Bill?
That seems to be the case, Mr. Chairman. We almost daily, to the point where Bob is like looking at me sideways when I walk down the hall to see him. He's like, I'm going to ask you again, how is it? No, seriously, he's doing the best he can. It's just the fact that the state is pretty clear about its deadlines, and they don't really, they don't change it beyond that.
Is it really articulated as a deadline though, or was it, we'll try to get back to you?
Apparently it is. It's
Okay.
something that they send you an indication as to when you'll have the answer, and they stick to it. So we'll see what happens.
So one thing the committee might want to talk about. So it's Frank's opinion, the town moderator, that we would have to vote on these again. And so my inclination, and this is unfortunate for Mike and Eric, but my inclination is not to go through the entire presentation process again, largely because I don't think we're going to have time. But we'll have to talk about, do we vote for these as a group, or do we want to vote for these one by one again, which is more of my instinct. But I'd open that up to any comments. Let's assume for a minute this does end up on the warrant and the AG opines that we have to still vote as a town on it.
If the AG opines on it, Mr. Chairman, it says that they are approved under the current process.
Yeah,
you should be okay.
No. I'm just throwing out to the group. If the AG says no, we are required to revote on these.
That's correct.
So I'm just throwing it open to the group. We may want to think about, do we just hold a vote for each of them again? I don't know about getting presenters in because we're almost out of time, and we're not even going to find out the answer till March 8th. But I'd open that up to comments from the committee.
I would think we'd vote on each one again at advisory committee vote and go pretty quickly.
Yep. Yeah, 5 of the 6 were nearly unanimously voted in at town meeting. 1 failed by a pretty significant margin, I would say, given the requirement of 2/3. So we could just go through and vote them all again. And any other thoughts on that? Okay. And then we've got the 2 marijuana actions, which Jay is on those. And so I don't know. I know he's got some questions already on that, but he is not on the call. And then we've got the billboard, which Jack is on that one. So we will.
I just, as background, I did a little bit of searching online to see if I could find the issue here really is distracted driving. And is that significant?
Yeah.
And there's surprisingly little relevant publications on that area. And part of it's because the money is all for put up the billboards.
Sure.
So the sponsorships aren't there. But part of it's also is it's a difficult measurement to make. If somebody has a rear ender, they're not going to say, well, I was looking at that billboard. They're not going to say that. And so the reality is it's a difficult item to get anything quantitative. The best you can do is measure how many seconds does the driver tend to look at a sign when he goes by, when it flashes. And that's the best they can do.
And just by way of advanced information, Jack or Bill, what would be the locations on these?
Well, it's the specific locations are that have been proposed so far are the one at DPW, in the DPW yard, which would actually be very beneficial for the community. The second one is financially beneficial to the community. The other one is located off of, somebody could help me out here, that's often referred to as Dump Road.
Belcher or?
Yeah, Belcher Road, yeah, it'd be off of Belcher Road, and then it would face towards 95 and would be included in the zone. And there's some discussion going on about some aspects of it that they're trying to determine how many potentially could be done. There's furthermore more discussion to come on that in terms of maybe some possible amendments to the bylaw itself. But I think the concern is that we don't want a lot of them up there because I don't think anybody wants sign pollution either. I mean, but I do think that a number of communities along 95 have actually reaped some pretty significant benefits. This is similar to marijuana in that respect, in that, you know, we're on the back end of both of these issues, mainly because we've had them along Route 1, but these are primarily for electronic billboards, not for the stationary billboards. The electronic billboards are actually they're very valuable to a community in many ways, and it also provides for community messaging as well. So if we had something that we wanted to put out as a message for Foxborough, we could do that because we own the board, particularly the one at DPW. On the other ones, we'd be entering into a hosting agreement, which would also pay us a certain amount of benefit as well.
And so then
Bill,
go ahead.
Bill, as originally written, I thought there was at least in principle the potential for a sign on 495, not far from South Street.
Yeah, it does look like that's a possibility, Jack, but it's, and I'm not the expert there in terms of when they actually get out there and look at it. I think probably from a zoning perspective and from a map perspective, that's possible, but whether it is on an engineering basis is another question. Because there seems to be some question as to whether or not you could actually locate a sign in that particular area due to the natural terrain of the area, et cetera. And you can only locate it so close. There are limits to how close you can get. You can put it to an interchange of 95 and say 495 at that location.
So those last
revenue are they anticipating?
Go ahead.
What's that? I'm sorry.
How much revenue are they anticipating? Let's assume there's a sign behind the highway garage.
Yeah, so that one is interesting because actually we could actually gain money in two ways on that. First is the ground lease for the sign to be erected on, and that's payable either upfront or over a period of time. And you know, it's difficult to say exactly how much we would get until we went out and bid it. But I think, but I've been told that it could be, you know, over $1 million potentially for that. And then there's the ongoing revenue piece, which is how much you receive from the actual percentage of sales that go on the board itself. So you receive a payment monthly from the billboard company for the use of the sign, and that gets paid to the town as a revenue that way. The town also becomes eligible for revenues as a hosting agreement, which then also provides them a fixed amount plus the potential for a percentage of the sign payments as well. So even though we may not own the other ones, we still could be eligible for hosting agreement payments as well.
So if you were to add the total of perhaps 2 or 3 locations, we could be talking an annual income of $1 million.
Mr. Town Manager, my only concern here is this: the actual presentation of this was not an agenda topic, right. So we're falling under logistics. So Jack's asking great questions. And we'll
follow up on that, but I don't have that actual number yet, Jack. I mean, like I said, you don't know that until you put it out to bid. And unfortunately, I mean, I can give you estimates as to what people have told me and what experts have told me, but it's my intention to, and I've discussed this with the board, the chairman of the board at least, that I want to hire an expert to help us negotiate this deal, because this is not an expertise that I have or anyone else has in the town. I think we want to make sure we have the right people involved in negotiating the right deal for the town for that.
So logistical question. There's this item and there's the 2 marijuana items. That are those both complete and ready to present? And do you think you'll be here next week with, I don't know, Barney or whoever to present?
I do. I think next week will be okay. We have a meeting on the marijuana piece on Monday that will help clarify a few things and concerns that we're actually working side by side with the planning board in this one, and then we're also working side by side with the zoning board of appeals on the billboard issue.
So does it potentially change? So, I think about some of the zoning articles, Bill, that changed at town meeting, right? So just little tweaks, like we had to clean up some of the language. Is that potentially going to happen for these 3 articles, the 2 marijuana and the 1 billboard?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. Yes,
Okay.
You may say, but it's more logistical language.
Yeah. Okay.
And the general notion of the action itself is not going to change significantly.
Yeah.
Like for instance, the zoning pieces are same things that are being discussed with the planning board to make sure that they're going to be located in the right zones, and that we essentially gave them essentially a draft, and let them decide and determine whether or not they wanted to change that. And it's entirely up to them to do so. It's within their purview to do so.
And I have a question that might be more for the town moderator, but this is what happens when you volunteer to be here, Bill, and I do appreciate that.
No, it's all right, because it's important, because these are complicated issues.
Yeah.
And I think you really should know the logistics that we're dealing with.
Exactly.
And the selectmen have always had the ability to amend something before it actually gets posted. So,
Okay.
and we have done that. So right now,
Okay.
all we have is it's a draft warrant, and therefore, until it actually gets posted, it doesn't become problematic.
Perfect. Okay, that's what I was wondering about.
Right.
Okay, because I don't want poor Jay to have to read the entire 2 articles because of a few word changes. So, and I see Jay is on. Hello, Jay.
Hi guys, sorry I got tied up with some things. Bill, I guess we're talking a little bit about the marijuana law for next week. Could we ask if we could get a map of where in town the zoning for that would allow for? Because it's a lot of different things. So many feet from schools, so many feet from churches, and certain zones. I'm wondering if visually we can see where these things could actually go or not.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide it as soon as I have it, John, but I think that's something that we're going to wait. I have to wait for the planning board to take its action first. All right. So, and then once I have that, I'll be happy to provide it for you. And I think, and by the way, good news is that I spoke with Paige Duncan today. She was actually in the office today for a little while.
Oh, nice.
She's expected to be back in the office next week. And she intends to run point on the marijuana issue with me, and then help with the billboard issue as well. So we will. So it's nice to have an important team member back, and that she can actually help clarify some of that, particularly as they relate to the zoning boards, the planning boards issues and zoning boards issues. Okay.
Okay, so we'll add, those 2 will be on the agenda next week. If you know the presenters now, you could let me know, or you could email me separately. If it's still not 100% clear, I don't actually have to list them on the agenda. So just let me know. I'll have the agenda. I won't have to send the agenda in until Monday.
Right.
So, okay.
I'll give you as much information as I can.
Yeah. Thanks. I know I've been pinging you a lot lately, but this turns out, I think the first thing I said to you about this warrant is the articles don't look that complicated, which is the dumbest thing I may have said in my entire time on the AdCom. So they are.
That's exactly why you should have.
I never should have said it. Never should have said it. So they look simple on the surface. Okay.
Right.
All right. So then
we'll try to make it as easy as we can, Ian. That's the goal.
Thank you.
Right.
The team's been great supporting me. I would add Christina as well behind the scenes, helping organize a lot of this has been great. So just for everybody's benefit, we will, I think, definitely meet through the 23rd, potentially the 30th. If I can try sneaking in the recommendations a day late, I would like to start voting the 16th if possible. We've typically voted over 2 sessions, so we don't feel rushed. The budget will get voted in sections, so that alone takes a fair chunk of time. And ideally, we will be in person. Most likely, I think we will be in person. So, and then when we finally get everybody will get a break for about a month after we set the recommendations in, about 5 weeks, and then we'll all go to town meeting. And as Larry often told me, the hard work will all be done by that point. So, okay. And Dan, I will be collecting write-ups this time. You did last time, but I figure with you jumping on the CIP, I know that's a pretty big commitment. I'll take that piece back.
Okay, that works. I just wanted to say I'll send out the notes for last week's meeting tomorrow, and then we'll have them ready to vote on for next Wednesday.
Okay, excellent.
Dan, just for your benefit on the meeting on Saturday, we because we have federal money to use, which does not require town meeting action. I think that the goal of the committee will be to determine the worthiness of some of these articles and whether they should be funded or not. More likely than not, we're gonna use as little town money as possible this year to try and give the free cash a break, and then so hopefully we can we'll have some flexibility as to when those projects get acted on and funded, but they won't have to be required to be paid for necessarily at town meeting. So that's good news. All right.
Awesome. I thought you were going to use federal money to buy breakfast, but that's good.
I can work on that. I can work on it. It'll be federal money. It'll be probably Keegan money, but not federal money.
So this will be televised at what time Saturday for everybody's benefit?
8:30.
8:30. So good background TV on 38, channel 38 if you're on Verizon.
And we try to be done by 1 o'clock at the latest, but I'm hoping for 12:30, if that's okay with you, Dan. All right. Very good.
All right. Any other topics from the committee?
What's the timing, Paul, in the memos and the process? I mean, just quickly.
So the final recommendations due to the town on the 30th. What that will typically mean, the best way to do this, Mike, is you could even technically write the wording of your article now. You wouldn't include the vote, right?
No.
And then we will do the actual voting, which will then, if you've looked at the recommendations before, there's the title. It's not the full text of the warrant, God help us. It's just our summary of the warrant, and then often a line or two about why we voted how we did, and then we voted to approve or disapprove. I will collect all those, and then I will go through them. Probably I'll ask Dan for a little proofing help on that, and then I'll send out one last pass for everybody to look at. At the same time, I will submit them to the town on the 30th or thereabout, and I will publish them in the patch. So what you're being asked to do is know your topic, and it was presented recently. Talk to Dan if you have questions about it, do the write-up, and then get it to me by a certain date. I'll start hounding everybody right around the 23rd and encouraging you to get done early so that I'm not in a panic on the 30th.
Got it. Thank you.
God, this is just like being back at work. I'm telling you, retirement.
Paul, did Selena have an article?
I've already reassigned them. Sharon has very nicely, hello, Sharon, has very nicely taken Selena's article. So yes. So reapportionment has happened. Anybody else? All right, Marla, real quick, if you could just double check. I don't know if I'm going to spam or something, but you were copied on the email. If you could follow up with the petitioner, she has not responded to the email yet. So,
okay.
Excellent.
Paul, sorry, did I miss it? Did Selena leave the committee?
Oh yeah. Sorry, yes, she had too many other commitments and she dropped off the committee. So I thanked her for her work.
Okay, sorry about that.
No. I should have thought to catch you up on it. So. All right. I'm sensing a motion to adjourn. There's one from Eric. How about a second?
Seconded.
Nice. All in favor, raise your hand. And Jay, I need you to say yes or show your face. Or there you go. All right. It is unanimous. Thanks again, Mr. Town Manager. And thanks to the select board. Yep. Take care, everyone. We will talk to you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.